Hello, my name is Bill Myers, and you're listening and watching Righting Wrongs on the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. I have the privilege today of speaking with Sarah Vogel about her memoir, which is a true life legal drama entitled The Farmer's Lawyer, the North Dakota Nine, and the Fight to Save the Family Farm. It is a real David and Goliath battle that Sarah waged against the federal government to protect family farmers during the 80s farm crisis. It is inspiring, it is heartwarming, and it is heartbreaking all at once. Sarah Vogel, for those of you who do not know her, is one of the foremost agricultural lawyers in the United States. She was the first woman ever elected Commissioner of Agriculture. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's really, really good to be here.
So Sarah, I'm going to begin with a quote that's in the front of your book by William Jennings Bryan. Burn down your cities and leave our farms, and your cities will spring up again as if by magic. But destroy our farms, and the grass will grow in the streets of every city in this country. What did William Jennings Bryan mean by that, and do you believe it?
I do believe it, and I think we see that today. Much of the news of the day is what is happening in rural America. Why are the small towns in such, and this is all over the country, but it's because farming, agriculture, the farmers go into town, they buy the seed, the fertilizer, the appliances, they shop, and then they grow and they produce, and it's really worked out much better. But in modern times, with the growth of the huge corporate farms, they're just not supporting the smaller towns, the medium-sized towns. And I think food is the basis. We need food, we need water, we need air, and farmers are a solution to the food, the water, and the air. Right. So, and it all comes from the soil.
Yeah, and I think, and you're right, and I think what William Jennings Bryan said over 100 years ago is as true as today. Yeah. Farming is the backbone of the country. Everything starts with food. No food, no people, no nothing. And what you bring out in your book is how the family farm is disappearing. The big agricultural companies are taking over. And you talked about what has happened with farmers from the 1930s into the 1980s and the 1980 farm crisis. And, it's still continuing today, and we'll get into that. What I'd like to start with, though, is just tell us a little bit about yourself. How, where did you grow up? How did you end up being a lawyer? And how did your career take you ultimately to representing family farmers against the United States government?
Well, I was born in North Dakota, and I was born into a little known political party called the Nonpartisan League. They're the original, well, not the original prairie populists, but they got going in 1917. And at one point, the Nonpartisan League had complete control of the whole government of North Dakota, the House, the Senate, all of the elected officials. And when they were in control, they set up a system of what you call economic democracy. They set up a state-owned bank that is celebrated over 100 years. They have a state-owned mill and elevator. And their idea was that the state should partner with farmers and workers. The union people, the laborers, were just much part of the league as the farmers. And so they set up this model of economic democracy that it sort of inspired me my whole life. And in the 1930s, my grandfather was a politician, and he worked with a significant governor of the time. They called him Wild Bill Langer, and he was actually like a Columbia educated lawyer, Columbia law educated lawyer, first in his class, etc. But he came back to North Dakota, and he was like a phenomenal lawyer and was the governor at the time. And they were waves and waves and waves of foreclosures going on, and he declared a foreclosure moratorium to stop the flood of the losses of the farms. It was extremely serious. He thought FDR wasn't doing enough.
Right.
And so so I grew up with this philosophy, and then after college, I went to law school at New York University, and then I did consumer protection work. I did a little stint in corporations, in a bank and in corporations, which was a great learning experience.
Right.
When you see how, there are good, certainly very good corporations, good citizen corporations, and there's some who are not so good.
Yeah.
From there, I went to Washington, D.C., and I was the first program head of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which was the first law that forbade discrimination in all kinds of credit, commercial credit, consumer credit, housing, all kinds of credit. And that's when I encountered for the first time the USDA and its little agency, not so little, it was the big agency called the Farmers Home Administration, which made residential loans and farm loans. And that, it's so much in the news today. I think you may have heard about, the demands of the Black farmers and the Native American farmers for, recompense for all the discrimination that they incurred all these years. But I knew this in 1977 and 78 because of all of the lenders, and we had thousands of lenders, and we were receiving tens of thousands of complaints about discrimination. The worst was USDA. So that sort of gave me an edge. So when the first farmer came in and said this particular agency of USDA had treated him quite badly, I was certainly able to believe it. It didn't sound at all implausible. And then after Reagan was elected, and then I moved over to the Treasury Department, which was really kind of a fancy job. I was right down the hall from the secretary, and ate in the secretary's dining room, and was part of the upper management. I had a title. It was a program set up by Jimmy Carter that every secretary in his cabinet had to have a consumer affairs advisor to steer that cabinet member correctly on consumer issues. And I was it for Treasury for a while. What?
You had to leave the federal government in order to sue the federal government and represent farmers.
Yeah. Well, I left like 2 days after Ronald Reagan got elected, really quickly after he got elected, because I thought there just isn't any way that he was going to support a consumer protection position. It was an executive order, and I thought it would expire. But that enabled me to work with farmers. And I moved back to North Dakota, and the first farmer told other farmers, and then pretty soon my phone was ringing from morning until night, and farmer after farmer like in the back of your screen, there are I'm talking to two farmers in a field, and they were amongst the first farmers I worked with. But the story I kept hearing was the same about really abusive tactics and disregard of the law and disregard of the Constitution.
Yeah, in your
That brought me back.
I just wanted to read something because it struck me. It's in the prologue, which you call, but it's the call. You got a call. It says, in the summer of 1983, I was 37 years old, the single mother of a young son working to win the case of my life. All over the country, farmers were in crisis, drowning in debt, on the verge of losing everything. My phone never stopped ringing. I had seen a man who'd been farming for 30 years break down and cry helplessly in my office. I had watched younger men choke up over the death of their dreams. How bad was the farming crisis of the 80s, and what was causing it?
I still get choked up thinking about those times. I mean, it was very emotional. What caused it, I think, was it built up. I mean, interest rates were incredibly high. There were big problems in the marketplace, but the trigger, the fault line that turned it from bad times to total crisis was a decision by the Reagan administration to reduce delinquencies in all federal loans by 20% in every single agency. And that included the Farmers Home Administration, which had been set up in the 30s by President Roosevelt to be the compassionate, patient provider of low-cost credit.
Right.
But with David Stockman and Ronald Reagan, they really didn't want to see that program there. They didn't think farmers should be borrowing from the federal government. And so they put this big crackdown, and all of a sudden there were thousands of notices that went out to farmers saying, we won't lend to you anymore. And by the way, you owe all of the money that you borrowed, and you have to pay it within 30 days. And in the meantime, we're not going to give you any money to feed your cattle, to pay your electric bill, to buy fuel. You're done. You can quit, or we'll take your farm. Two choices.
And this
that was all over the country.
right, and it was, I mean, all the small and mid-sized family farms,
Yeah,
were the ones that were affected.
they were. Yes, there were roughly about 240,000 farmers nationwide who had borrowed from the Farmers Home Administration, and they were the farmers that could not get credit elsewhere. And over the years, Farmers Home from the 30s on had very low default rates because they were patient, they had good terms, they had people who cared. They were like social workers. And they did marvelous work for decades. But under Ronald Reagan, that system was turned on its head, and it became absolutely oppressive and harsh, unbelievably harsh. And these farmers had secured all their crops, their cattle, their buildings, a home, everything, machinery, to the Farmers Home Administration. And then Farmers Home said, it's all due. Your loans are accelerated. We're coming. And they would show up with trucks, and they would take stuff away. And there's a movie people may want to watch.
Which one is
It's called
it?
Moving Country. And it's by Jessica Lange, had the vision to make it. And she starred in it and was nominated for the Academy Award. And it's a story of farmers who, just like the farmers I worked with, and it's in a movie form, Country. is the name of the movie. It's a great movie and it's absolutely accurate. And it just breaks, well, it's too nice to the USDA at the end. But be that as it may, but it's pretty harsh. But it shows the impact on family farmers, how that was.
So let's talk about what happened when Sarah Vogel gets involved and files this class action. Who did you file it against? Who were your plaintiffs? And how did it unfold?
Okay. Well, I filed it against, the case was called Coleman et al. Versus Block.
Right.
And it was John Block, he was the Secretary of Agriculture under Ronald Reagan. And my plaintiffs, who we ended up calling the North Dakota Nine. I could tell you a little story of how the name North Dakota Nine came about.
Yes, please.
They were the lead plaintiffs in a class action. You have to have representative plaintiffs who represent the whole class. And so I just called them the lead plaintiffs. But many years later, when I at last was able to visit with the judge long after the case was over, he started talking about the North Dakota Nine. And I said, well, who are the North Dakota Nine? Who are they? And he said, well, they're your lead plaintiffs. And how did that come about? And he had heard about the Chicago Seven.
Okay. Was that Judge Van Sickle?
That was Judge Van Sickle. He invented. So
Okay.
he had heard about the Chicago Seven, who are the wild-eyed radical,
Right.
and they had this big prominent trial with a really bad judge, not like Judge Van Sickle. But he thought that these North Dakota Nine farmers, in their very simple North Dakota farmer way, were just as radical and were sticking up for for freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution, in the same way as the Chicago Seven. So that's how the North Dakota Nine came about.
It reminds me of the saying in your book, we've raised too much corn and not enough hell.
Right. So
you changed that though. You and your nine changed it.
Yeah. So these farmers were, they'd been treated so badly. And, I had taken constitutional law and in law school, I had great teachers. And I knew the federal government because I'd been at the Federal Trade Commission, I'd been at the Treasury Department, and I knew a lot about credit. And I just couldn't believe how badly these farmers were being treated. So basically find out what the causes of action are. And they were disregarding a federal law that said that whenever a farmer was unable to pay due to circumstances beyond his or her control, then the government may provide a deferral as opposed to foreclosure. And Block had decided that that was a discretionary law. He didn't have to follow that. He didn't have to tell farmers about it. But the worst part was that the way they were collecting, they would have a security agreement over all of the income from the farm, the wheat, the milk, the cattle, everything. And when they decided they were going to shut somebody off, they accelerated the debt and not one penny went back to the farmer. And this came with no notice.
Wow.
All of a sudden, one day, the farmers' checks would bounce because they had supervised bank accounts, and they just empty the bank account and they would stop releasing all money. And they were, electricity was disconnected. Wow. People were calling up because they couldn't get their kids into the doctor. Their health insurance was being canceled. It was horrible. And it was a constitutional violation. So the difficult part, and what the book talks a lot about, is it isn't easy to sue the federal government.
Yeah, I know.
You have to follow certain avenues that allow you to sue the federal government. You have to find the cause of action. You have to exhaust all administrative remedies, which was very difficult because the administrative remedy that was offered was so appalling. The judge, the hearing officer, would oftentimes be the very person who had made the decision, or work right under the person who made the decision. And farmers just weren't winning, but they should have won. And they didn't care what the law was. I mean, I literally went into hearings and I said, well, this is the law. And they said, this is true. They said, we don't follow the law. We follow procedure.
I
So,
want to point one thing out. The farmers are in economic stress. Their assets are taken, their money is taken. They come to you to represent them. They can't pay you. So you end up with nothing. You end up living in your father's house. And this battle becomes, on the one hand, the United States government, represented by the biggest law firm in the world, which is the Department of Justice. And on the other, Sarah Vogel, her father, a prominent trial attorney and Supreme Court justice, and a couple other people. And ultimately, you prevail. How did that happen?
well, I have to give my father a lot of credit, because I figured this case was so extreme, and he was a sensible person. I thought, so I hung out by myself, which was probably pretty rash, and always thinking that pretty soon some more money will come in. Well, it really didn't come in, but I went and worked for my father only after my own house had gotten the final note. I tried to defend my own foreclosure, which I did for a little while, but it became hopeless. And so I called him up and I said, can I come work for you? Which he'd been asking me to do for a couple of years. And he said, sure. So I moved into my parents' basement, my son and I, and he paid my salary. But by that point, I had the complaint ready. I had exhausted most of the administrative remedies. I had the plaintiffs, and so I was able to. I told him. I said, "Well, the case is basically done." That was certainly not true. But what did I, But he grew up in the nonpartisan league too, and his father was part of the generation who were fighting the foreclosures in the 30s. So he was very supportive. And then I found other lawyers. The litigation director of the National ACLU called and said, I hear you have quite the case. I found a class action lawyer, Alan Canner, who's now one of the, he is now probably the most prominent class action lawyer in the nation. And they came in and helped. And so we had a really good legal team, and we worked hard. And then we did all our work undercover, so to speak. It was like we exhausted administrative remedies, we developed the briefs, we developed the complaint, and then we sprang it on the federal government because we had to.
Right.
Because people were bringing cases all over the country, and with one exception, down in Georgia, farmers were losing.
Right.
Because the Department of Justice would just, beat down little private practitioners. So it was quite the drama. Yeah.
And here's a part that I found very dramatic. I'm a trial lawyer, you're a trial lawyer, and I can tell people a trial lawyer's classic anxiety dream is you're notified by the court that you have a trial the next day
Yeah,
that you're not ready for. You got that call.
I got that call.
Oh, share
Yeah.
that
Oh,
that made
God.
my heart race when I read that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, it was perhaps anyway, what happened is that we had been maneuvering with all the motion practice and this and that, and then filed a case in May, and it was all going our way. And in September, we were going to have a summary judgment hearing,
Right.
which and a hearing is not a trial. And we'd agreed that it was all going to be done on the basis of affidavits and no need for witnesses.
Right.
I got that in writing, the transcript. And then the day, and I've done all these briefs, big fat briefs, 100-page briefs. I got a call from the law clerk, thank God. And he said, and I apologized. I said, well, I'll get my brief to you tomorrow morning. I'm driving in tonight. And he said, no, I'm not calling about the brief. I'm calling to find out what witnesses you're bringing to the trial tomorrow. And I just, trial. He said, yes, the trial tomorrow. And then it's like, so I've never done a trial. I had never watched a trial. I had 8,500 farmers relying on me, and my dad wasn't available. My co-counsel weren't available. And so I called my clients and I said, show up.
Mhm.
And we prepared in the morning and I went and did the trial. And it was like,
Yeah.
after the first day when I walked out, I felt like I had been run over by a bus. I just hurt. It was like, so
Yeah.
I had the nicest judge too, but he still had to be fair.
Right. Literally the worst thing that every trial attorney fears.
Yeah,
You ultimately, in the end, you ultimately prevailed.
right.
And I mean, your career is the stuff of legend. And I want to ask you this because most lawyers go through their whole career and they never find a true cause. You know, they represent one client and another client and another client, but they never find themselves in a position where there's an overarching cause that they can, you know, claim as their own and fight a war for. You found that cause. You're one of the few lawyers who's been lucky enough to find that. And I guess my question is, how do you feel about that? I mean, you know, do you feel lucky because you found this cause? I mean, I know early on it was horrifically difficult in every possible way, financially, professionally, but now you're looking back on it.
No,
Would you do it all over again, Sarah?
I would. I gotta say that working with farmers has been one of the best experiences of my life because they're great clients. They are, you know, they're all self-starters. You know, there's nobody telling them what to do. I mean, they're linked to the land, and they care deeply about what they're doing, and they're very proud of what they do. They feed the rest of us. So it's a good feeling to help farmers. So I loved working with farmers. And I worked with farmers on very little issues, and I work with farmers on very big issues. And it's always been a very good experience. So I really liked, I've enjoyed that a lot. And also farmers they're typically individuals, and they're typically having to buy from great big corporations, and they're having to sell to great big corporations. So they're caught in the middle, often in a vice. But one of the nice things about being a lawyer for farmers is that there's a lot of commonality in their mistreatment. So
Right.
you can often find a lawsuit in that mistreatment. So, so like one time a farmer called me, his name was Denny Ova from Jamestown. And I had a little message on my desk, and he says, "Sarah, call me right back. They took away my 71 cents." And I, well,
Okay.
okay, I know Denny, I'll call him back. 71 cents. What's the deal with the 71 cents? Well, it turned out it was 71 cents per bushel of durum wheat that he had insurance on.
Okay.
And the government had signed a contract saying they would pay a certain amount. And then they had just decided to dock it by 71 cents. So that case turned into a $42 million case because so many farmers had been mistreated in the same way. So one of the reasons why I wrote the book is that I really do want people to care about family farmers, to care about the family farm system of agriculture, which is under threat, and to remind people how important it is to have these individuals, people close to the land who care about their animals. I mean, the way my my clients worked to take care of their animals, I mean, it was impressive. So, and the land, a farmer that is hoping to pass his land on to his children and grandchildren is not going to be dumping chemicals into the river, into the creek. They're not. They're going to be planting trees and trying to make the soil better. So there's a difference between corporate agribusiness and family farmers. So I really hope that the book will encourage lawyers to represent family farmers, for society to support family farmers, and to straighten things out.
Yeah. Well, let me say, and I have the book in the background behind me, and I have it here. It's harder to see, but it opened my eyes to what goes on and has gone on with our farmers. It opened my heart. I would encourage everyone to read this book, whether you're a lawyer, a non-lawyer, or you're just interested in justice and injustice, and you like to read a story where Goliath is toppled by David. This is your book. And I mean that, Sarah, and I'm honored to have read the book, and I'm honored that you're on the podcast. Is the book, I got an advance copy. Is the book out now? And when and where can people get it?
The book will be out. The release date is November 2nd, and
Okay.
It's going to be out nationwide. You can go online. It's for sale at local bookstores, a bookshop. I think Bookshop, which is the outlet for independent booksellers. People can go to their local indie bookstores. They can go to Walmart, Amazon, you name it. The book is out there. So people, please do pre-order it. And to make a little pitch, in a few weeks, we're going to get the surviving North Dakota 9 together along with the legal team. My father is passed away, but Alan and Bert, the class action and the constitutional lawyer, and we're all going to be on a little reunion on Zoom, November 10th or 11th. I have a website, sarahmvogel.com, and it's got a lot of information and also a lot of reading, so people can find out about the Nonpartisan League and the philosophy and the issues of today and stuff like that.
Okay, Sarah.
So get the book. Yeah.
Yes, get the book. Let me sign off. My name is Bill Myers. You can get me at williamlmyersjr.com. This is the podcast Righting Wrongs on the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. And it's been my honor to speak with Sarah Vogel today. Sarah, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's been a privilege and it's been fun talking. Thank you.
Okay, me too. Thank you, everyone.